late to the party over the current take of what Undertaker said about the current state of WWE's affairs and how he feels about how it currently is. Because, of course, we understand over the course of Undertaker's career, the last time he was technically full time over a consistent basis practically was probably '08 to like '09. And he's stepped out over the business. He's been over to take breaks occasionally whenever there's only a special storyline or an occasional event like a WrestleMania or Survivor Series or a Saudi event. He's coming back probably another Saudi event. Other than that, he of course had his own takes and undermined either than what I've been hearing, that even though it's hard to hear, he of course discussed over the in ring abilities pretty with not that much substance. He's complaining about the locker room mentality, about how wrestlers came off looking gritty and tough to now guys like messing around playing with freaking video games, and there's not that much veterans to interline with the young guys to teach them much. And over what I've heard, over what he said, he's absolutely right. What you thought I was gonna say? What did you really think I was gonna say? He was perfectly right. And this is, and over most of the guys defending themselves over the standpoint, I understand they're trying to sell each other off. Of course, Drew wants to defend his co-workers. He wants to defend the current guys that want to keep their job. And over the standpoint that WWE has lost popularity, relevance, mainstream attendance, casual viewing audience, and decline over ratings for the standpoint of nearly over 15 years. Other than me and a couple of notable wrestling YouTubers over the YWC, who else you hear about speaking wrestling unless occasionally that they remember? They don't really care. They don't care. And over most of the guys complaining about it, they're not none of them even agreed with the Undertaker to even understand the standpoint of, maybe they're right. Maybe he's right because, he spent 30 years in this business. Other than some internet geek, some internet nerd retard that has no experience over with the business, only complains about what matches he likes, they never take their opinions over with veterans of the business, guys that wrestled for years, or guys that know their stuff. And Undertaker's just speaking as true as he can because he has nothing else to do that involves wrestling. He's already a notable icon in professional wrestling and mainstream, one of the most notable characters. The guy actually done stuff that many people, even if they have gimmicks, they don't do at all. They keep it kayfabe. Sure, people know who Mark Carraway is, but people know who the Undertaker is to Mark Carraway. See him dressed around over the dark. He used to keep it mega Undertaker in and out the ring. You don't see wrestlers do that anymore, other than bitching around over Twitter. That is the most depressing thing I've heard in my life, and I thought wrestlers, and what's plaguing over the societal part of pro wrestling, social media wise, and just the current state of people's mentality, because people wanted to play over the victim. I think Drew McIntyre and Roman Reigns acting so whiny over Undertaker's opinion, because they know absolutely he's telling the truth, because he has nothing else to lose. We know that Undertaker's going to go to the Hall of Fame. You know that this guy already put over his time in the business, and the guy has been there over 2 boom periods of pro wrestling. The Hogan era and the frickin' Attitude Era. There since Ruthless Aggression. The guy has literally most of the history of WrestleMania under his belt. How can you not take his word literally? I mean, seriously, how can you not take his word seriously? That sounds dumb. McIntyre and Roman just sought themselves over some ridiculous claim saying that they work harder than the guy. Dude, that makes no sense. All because it's current day doesn't mean you're a better wrestler. That's the same thing with basketball, and that's what makes those claims completely out the water. All because it's current doesn't mean it's better. Basketball from 2020 basketball isn't as good always as 2019 basketball. Is it different? Yes. Does it make it better? No. It's just the things like this that makes it really hard to be a wrestling fan, and it's embarrassing because I shouldn't be ashamed of liking something that I've been watching since I was a kid. It shouldn't be a bad thing to get other people outside of this to be invested. And now every time they complain about it because it's fake crap, and some of the wrestlers or the fans take it way too seriously as it is, and get way too defensive over most of it. Hell, you can even ask a wrestler to lose weight, and then you'll get freaking attacked on your freaking comment section over most of the garbage. And I read it because I actually care what people say. Their opinion does matter. I take their takes serious. I don't take their takes that seriously, but if it's going to be opinionated and they actually have something to make it, you get it. I don't mind listening to people, but my guy, it's just depressing. And the saddest thing of Undertaker, like even the freaking Undertaker that's a diehard for the WWE. Yes, he's worked for like WCW back when he was younger, but this guy that literally defined WWE and his character off this company alone, and nobody's taking that stuff seriously, or just getting overly defensive over his opinion and how the direction the company is declining over this current state. Now Vince is not doing anything about it. It's really showing how sad some of these guys over in the business are. How they come from doing drugs, lifting, doing smokes around the locker room, to playing party games, acting wussy, to getting fights with fans on Twitter, complaining about if they had a 5-star match, or playing stupid portable video games in the middle of a freaking locker room while you're pretending to fake fight. At least show the character that you're an ass kicker. And I think Undertaker was trying to solidify that as well over most of his claims, that none of these guys actually outtrade themselves in and out the ring as a badass. It's it's hard to say it, even though he's right. He was right, and he knows he was gonna get a bit of backlash over saying this. That's why he didn't regret saying it. He had nothing to clap back on with Roman Reigns, Drew McIntyre, Xavier Woods, anybody else's opinion. He knew what he had to say, and he kept it how it is. He wasn't changing his opinion. He wasn't apologizing for it. And I respect the Undertaker more because of stuff like that. And I wish more certain veterans do have negative things to say over the current portrayalness of the business, how the current wrestlers deal with it, and probably that there's a lack of veteran leadership helping out with these young guys how to actually make wrestling, good as it was back then, or actually make it make sense, or at least have a decent reputation. And it just doesn't seem like more people are doing that anymore. And that's why we got niche, over expensive companies that are probably gonna downfall in like possibly 2 to 3 years, like AEW. That unless Tony Khan actually gains testosterone in his body, actually listens to critiques from actual guys within the wrestling business, and stop getting creative power from the fucking Young Bucks and Kenny Omega and Cody Rhodes, and actually make something of this business that's literally being supported by a top cable, top channel like TNT. Possibly more people, especially guys that are anti-smart and of course casual viewers, would have more positives to say over the matter, other than saying this is a niche or expensive indie fed. Other than an alternative if you guys don't like WWE. He's right about WWE being soft, if nobody can take that type of criticism. He's right about how it's declined over its substance in pro wrestling, and If you guys can handle that type of truth, possibly you guys are in being a fan or at least being a wrestler for the wrong reasons in this standpoint. If you guys can't take criticism like that, because I'm just trying to understand why are people getting complaining this matter doing this many simple takes on something that's really basic. And Undertaker should know this because he has more experience than most of the guys that he was working with. Because out of anybody else, who else is the marquee over in the main roster other than the part timers? And most of them will point over their finger over to Vince McMahon. Okay, some issues creatively, Vince's problem. He's done it to himself, and he's been a part of his failures. But that's also the wrestler's responsibility to push themselves over, get themselves a good reputation. Some of them don't do that. Some of them don't even want to keep weight, understand opinions, get themselves into dumb crap for no reason, and have no interesting, charisma or character to speak of, other than they come from the indies, they scratched and clawed and worked all around the world. Seriously, you can go to WWE.com and I think you can hear half of the roster have that type of thing. I'm just a bit baffled that it's that bad to understand certain people don't like what comes out of the Undertaker's mouth. Because Undertaker was right. There's also some information over from Mark Henry that's also like a veteran in the business. And if I can just look it up right now. And we also have something from Ryback defending The Undertaker and his controversial remarks. As well on hand, WWE Hall of Famer Mick Foley recently said that the modern day pro wrestlers are just as tough as wrestlers from this era. Oh my god. Mark Henry recently took to Twitter and decided to reply to Mick Foley. Tweeted, "He started that men evolved and they are tougher than ever now or more refined. He ended it by saying WWE is a corporate industry and the current WWE superstars fit that mold." What? Today's professional wrestlers are very bit as tough as... That's just my opinion. Mick, how many cucks... Listen, Mick. If they are just as tough, they would have allowed chair shots to the head back. Mick, you took 10 chair shots to the head in one single I Quit match. And this is just under a decade. I'm not going to go over his shit in ECW or WCW. This is stuff that we just see on WWE television. Fell off at least a 4-story, like a multi-foot, Hell in a Cell steel cage on a commentary table. He had fell inside a Hell in a Cell in the freaking ring. That's also made of wood and padding. It's not going to be pleasant when you fall down. No, nothing's there to support you. Just the ring. He literally, in his match with The Undertaker, lost a tooth. And it went over to his nose. The guy got batted with a barbed wire 2x4, that was on fire onto a barbed wire platform, and was speared through a table on fire. Wrestlers like that complain over that the Elimination Chamber with fake chains that they have to pretend bump through is causing very little injuries, even though the most major injury came from the freaking Undertaker over a pyrotechnics incident that he ended up still doing the match with, I think, first degree burns on his arm. There was at least over double-digit injuries from 2015 How in the hell did Mick Foley say that the current day and age of pro wrestlers is hella more tough than guys from the 90s or 2000s? That is the most upstaking claim, and he's only doing this because technically he's a Hall of Famer. He's on payroll. The guy's going to be regularly scheduled for WWE appearances. The guy got to do what he can to still be relevant because he has Holy Foley or in garbage like that nobody watches. But thanks to over the guidance of WWE, he's getting paid, so he has to do whatever he can. Undertaker didn't give a shit. And of course, he's still going to be sponsored over by the company because he's The Undertaker. And he's more of a draw if he was still wrestling in his 70s than current parts of the roster. Because other than part-timers, nobody's a draw. And that matters. Some people like me that don't watch UFC ain't going to care who's going to be in UFC 360 other than freaking Conor McGregor that was saw him doing a narco rap or something, or doing some cocaine, and he's still gonna fight. Because that's a controversial figure. He has a crazy personality, and the guy also has a good reputation in the UFC, fighting wise. So, over that standpoint, Mick Foley is a cuck for the company, and that's so depressing. And Roman Reigns coming around saying that we do the same job. What? Roman, didn't it take you a while to actually get a positive reception from the fans? Didn't it take you until 2020, late 2020, to actually have a positive reception because they did something that they asked for? They wanted you to turn heel. You finally got a heelish persona over your standpoint. You've been getting booed out of the building. Other than you jerking off your arm with a freaking wearing a laser tag suit, the only cool thing you had was the freaking spear and being the most positive of the Shield. There was 30-something people fired last year. Wrestlers and personnel and referees. If they were that good, Vince would have found another way, another alternative to keep them on leave. Just make sure they don't appear in the Thunderdome. What good jobs? It's so ridiculous. It's so ridiculous. It should be a comedic joke. Your always wet-haired ass is lucky enough that I always think that you're the positive of the SmackDown. Other than that, this was a retarded take. I'm sorry, a stupid take by the tribal chief, Roman Reigns. Whenever you speak his name, you must have fear whenever you talk about the tribal chief. Paul Heyman just licking his lips whenever you say tribal chief. Oh my god, I don't want to think about that. Other than that, oh my god, bro. Drew McIntyre as well, but I couldn't remember, and of course it's not documented here. But those are most of what I had. Another person that also had opinions, that also has a few decades in the wrestling business. Of course, been there since boom periods, and had to call the Undertaker's matches. Jim Ross, over months ago, had his opinions over the current state of pro wrestling, the wrestling style in AEW, and the most negative reception he'd gotten was by a jobber by the name of freaking Brandon Cutler. That cuckold always rejected fake J1's period blood in his face jobber that think like 70% of fans know what Dungeons and Dragons is, and freaking gets absolutely bashed by the rest of the wrestling community because he knows that he has no apparent relevance over in AEW other than he knows the Young Bucks. And Jim Ross was stating over his claim because he knows he has to call this niche indie garbage. And I thought Jim Ross was like about to give up on life as soon as I saw him covering freaking. He was commentating for WCPW. If you guys don't remember what that was like when What Culture Wrestling thought they were that important in pro wrestling in a whole that they actually had a wrestling fed. And guess what? They changed it over to Defiant. They actually had to do house other names from Britain because they can't actually hold on to guys like Kurt Angle, Mysterio, and Alberto Del Rio, and then they fell off. The only thing defiant was you smarks not even holding up to an indie fed. That is depressing at its own right. CZW is still alive, while your asses have at least 1 million subs, and you couldn't even hold off that type of support. That is depressing. So that's all I gotta say. Undertaker, maybe the dead man is still a living legend to me. Other than that, he really had he had a really great take. I understand this is a bit late to the party. I know many people had their views, but I don't want to always feed into the craze. Want to get this video out because I've been just watching a lot of recent takes, especially over Keep It Real podcast and stuff like that. Many podcasts speaking over Undertakers Opinion. But yeah, I wanted to get my 2 cents in, late or not, because it really shows. Because we're in WrestleMania season, they're probably going to do another garbage multi-day event, even though they have less star power than they had before. A lackluster roster, and they're probably going to force some more NXT jobbers to just join the fray to have an excuse to make this more than 4 hours. And it's going to decline the product even more because people don't need that much wrestling in their weekend. Other than that, that's all I got to say. Have a good rest of your day. That's it for me.